All right, I think we're live. Hello, and welcome to Marketing Live. Marketing Live is part of a Higher Ed Live network, a series of professional development web shows and podcasts which are always free and accessible to you in the archives of higheredlive.com and on iTunes. Be a part of our broadcast by tuning in live and sharing your insights and questions using the hashtag HigherEdLive on Twitter. You can receive weekly updates with live show dates and times by subscribing to Higher Ed Live newsletter. Today's show would not be possible without the support of M. Stoner and FormStack. Higher Ed Live is produced by M. Stoner, a marketing communications firm that works with education institutions on branding, strategy, web design, and more. FormStack is a robust online form building solution. With an intuitive drag and drop interface, the platform makes it easy for marketers to create branded, mobile-ready web forms without writing code. Build donation forms, contact forms, event registrations, and more with the web's only 508 compliant form builder. Publish your forms and use FormStack's social media plugins to maximize your traffic. With in-app analytics and partnerships with popular marketing tools, you can get even more out of your captured data. Please visit www.formstack.com to learn more about the ways FormStack can double your response rates. So let's go into our topic for today. Designing, building, and creating websites and website content is a major commitment, and oftentimes they have to be redeveloped every couple of years. So let's learn how to build timeless and sustainable websites that can be updated with a new theme and a fresh look, and take a fraction of the time and resources. These are our guests for today. We'd like to welcome Sally Young.
Hi.
She is a senior developer for Lulubot and specializes in Drupal. She has a master's degree in computer science from the University of London and co-organizes Drupal Learning London, where she gives informal mini training sessions for new users. Chris Bullman, welcome Chris. Says hi, great. Is a senior front-end developer at Lulubot. He previously worked in higher ed at the University of Prince Edward Island in Canada. Chris has done a lot of work in open source world, including being a co-maintainer of Drupal's Zen theme, building his own SaaS grid system, and he's even dabbled in iOS app design. We also have Matteo Bosch. Hello, Matteo.
Hello.
Great. He's a senior developer at Lulubot. He has a master's degree from UC Berkeley and conducted research on acoustic pattern recognition and language detection at the University of Barcelona. He maintains the RESTful Drupal module, among others, and has been speaking on Drupal events for the last 5 years. So welcome. We're very excited to have you all here today.
Thank you for having us.
Great, and I think this is probably the most, I was telling them before, this is probably the most diverse group of folks that we have, the most international group. We have Canada, we have London, we have Spain, and we have America, so this is awesome. So as we said before, if any of our viewers do have questions, please go to Twitter and use them using hashtag HigherEdLive. All right, so let's dive into our questions. How long does it usually take to redo a website?
So that obviously depends on the size of the website, of course. But yeah, what we often find is that when you want to redesign a site, what you have to do is to start from scratch, abandon everything that you had before, and then write a migration to keep the content. You want to keep the content that you had in your old site, and then move it to the new site. That obviously takes a lot of time, and you should find other strategies to reuse your site better when you want to go through a redesign.
Excellent. I know here at I'm at the University of Virginia. I've also worked at the University of Florida and University of Michigan, and it usually takes, it seems like, at least a year, and it takes a ton of staff effort to go in there and rebuild the website, a ton of resources going through writing the content and adding pictures and all that kind of good stuff, and that's just on the conceptual stuff even before it comes into coding. So I'm sure everyone out there in the higher ed world can empathize with how much it takes to really put into a website. It's not something you can typically do in like a weekend.
Yeah, exactly. Here at Lullabout, we have a lot of expertise with media sites, and those tend to be big sites. And believe me when I say that it can take a long time to do one of these giant websites, like a university one, like you say.
Yeah, for a complete redesign, a year is definitely a minimum, it seems.
Oh yeah, it's a lot of work, and it's we're at the very end of our process right now of completely redoing our website, and it can be a big headache, but when the reward is so sweet. And then, of course, as soon as you're done, you got to redo it again. So with that, how often are organizations redoing their websites, and how often should we remake our websites?
I think that's seems to be a mixture of business and marketing needs. I think you should be asking yourself at least three questions. Does my website still represent what I'm doing? And do I need structural new features? And does the age site provide the image that I want to convey of my organization? And a number of other concerns as well. But if you answer more than one yes to more than one of those, I think you'd probably need to start thinking about the pros and cons of redoing a website.
That is a great point. All right, great. So let's dive into Drupal. I was very excited to meet some of the Lulubot folks and some of the other folks from around the country and around the world at this big convention that happened last week, DrupalCon. Were any of you guys there in LA?
Yep, I was there.
Yeah, we were all there.
Enjoying the sunshine.
Mm-hmm.
Great. I'm sure I probably walked past you. There's thousands of folks there. It's really crazy. But Drupal's a really interesting tool. Now I know I've used a bunch of different CMS content management systems. So I've used WordPress and Expression Engine and even Joomla. And what's so cool is that there are so many benefits to Drupal, and you guys are very much the experts on this. So let's dive in. So what are the benefits of using Drupal and using it as the back end of a website?
So Drupal is a very powerful, as you said, a very powerful and flexible tool. I believe that it's one of the best tools that you can use to build a website. It's obviously not always the best tool for the job, but as a generic tool, it does a very good job because it provides you a very good way of managing content models. So it allows you to build entities that represent all your content. So, for instance, you could have I don't know a research entity that contains a couple of fields, and that's your content. That's your content model, and then you can have other stuff as well. So when you're building something with Drupal, you can start plugging in a lot of different modules that basically are pieces of reusable code that other people contributed, and start like in a puzzle building complex interactions between those. So with Drupal, basically you can get 80% of the work in no time, and then concentrate in the 20% that gets tailored to your exact needs. So Drupal is really great at doing all those things, but still it won't get you exactly where you need to go. So you will have this around 20% of work that you will need to do or develop manually.
And I think that's so important too, because being able to leverage tools that other folks have put together, there's no sense in doing it all from scratch. So I love your point of having, 80% of Drupal can be used through leveraging modules, and then so it's very little coding when it comes to like 20% as opposed to the full 80%. So being able to leverage tools and stuff that other people have had, I think is excellent, because that way you make sure that it's almost like crowdsourcing.
Yeah, exactly. It's really great to be able to leverage all that code, and actually, it's really nice to contribute code to an open source project because it's what Drupal is. It's an open source project where you can contribute your code and get code that other people contribute for free. So all this is free.
I think that's an excellent point, and I love that you brought up the content module. So those are the folks out there that don't know what that is. What's so cool about Drupal is that you can organize text in like groups of text and repurpose them in different parts of the website. So for example, if you want like a spot on your website to has the address, if you and you want it to be on every single page and you want it to be like a little promotion over on the side, you can then in one spot update your address. Let's say you move offices, because that happens often in higher ed. In one spot, it can be, you can update the text and it'll then get published to everywhere. And there's a lot of really great opportunities to be able to use content, the same content in multiple areas without having to reproduce it. I think that's one of the big problems that we have in higher ed, is that we keep reproducing and using the same content over and over again without finding efficient ways of doing it. There's no sense in having the same content in 7 different pages if you can just publish it to one. So I think that's excellent. And I would like to apologize to my Lullabot folks. I was mispronouncing Lullabot. Am I saying it right now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Lullabot. I love that. It's like a lullaby. That's so good. So let's talk a little bit about what is coupled and decoupled websites. What does that mean?
So a coupled system would be where we have all our content that's all stored in one place, but we're actually using the same system in order to deliver that out to our website. So when we build things decoupled, we're actually separating those out entirely. It can get a bit blurry. So for example, in Drupal, we have a concept of templates, so we can push things out to our templates, but it's still very tightly bound to the content part of the system. So for example, you can get in situations where it's spitting out HTML markup, and you kind of have to start walking up the system and figuring out exactly where it all came from. So when you take a decoupled approach, you're splitting it out into completely independent systems, and that means you start to look at it slightly differently. So instead of your content model being very prescriptive about how you might display things on the front end, you tend to start worrying a little bit more about what the actual content is that you're trying to organize. And then from there, you might actually end up going out to lots of different places. So you might have data going out to your main website, you might have it going out to a mobile app, and all kinds of billboards, I don't know, things like that. And the other advantage of that is you can start to split up teams as well. So you can have one team working on the back end with a content strategist and back end developers. Meanwhile, you can get your front end team started as well, because the web is a really big place and there's lots of stuff to do. And despite my best endeavors, it's hard to know how to do everything. So you definitely need to bring teams together who have lots of skills in different areas.
So for the non-tech folks, what does it mean front end and back end? Is that where I, as a marketing person and as a writer, is that where I put my content in, or what does that mean?
Yeah, so the back end would be where you put all your content in. So we go in, write your article, blog post, whatever you do, and then front end is actually what you see when you load up your browser or your mobile app. So how everything is displayed on the page, what, you know, maybe you have funny animations or videos and things like that.
Very cool. So it sounds like decoupling is a way of like repurposing the same information in a lot of different locations, right?
Exactly. It does have drawbacks too. So for example, if you were wanting to build something where on the back end you could be really precise about the HTML that you want on the front end, so you might have seen sometimes you open up a back end and you see a big WYSIWYG, and then you can put whatever HTML you want in there and you end up with these great big content blobs. And sometimes that's great because you want to be able to do whatever you want to do to show on your website, but sometimes that's not great, because now if we want to push that out to, say, a mobile user, then it's going to be really hard because it's not going to be formatted to go on there. So it does come with restrictions, but actually those restrictions can allow your data and content to go out to all kinds of different streams.
Yeah, sometimes it's also easy to think about the separation between the front end and the back end, and that's an oversimplification. But a back end developer could be one that deals with code that executes in the server, and the front-end developer would be one that writes code or styles that execute in the browser. I don't know if that makes more sense.
No, I think that's great. So, and it sounds like with decoupling, we could, so one of the things that we're doing in our office is like we have digital signage, and then we have our website, and then we have our, so by essentially leveraging, we could create digital signage that like pulls information directly from our website, so that way it's multi-purposed in different areas. I'm just trying to think of like direct implications that would make our lives a lot easier, and it's almost like we could make tailored, personalized content for our users instead of having general brochure websites. So
Exactly.
that's awesome. So what kind of situations would be appropriate for building a decoupled site versus a coupled site? Like when would we want to use one or the other?
So if you're looking to create a site that is going to have a bit more longevity, so you're really thinking about your content model, you're not going to be wanting to migrate your site every single year, that's a really good candidate for when you want to do that. Also, if you want to keep redoing your front end, your design, you're not necessarily going to have to keep doing your back end either. You can start upgrading or redesigning parts independently as well.
That's great. So I could, if our website is currently blue and I want to change it into white, I can do that really quickly with a decoupled website as opposed to a coupled one where we have to do everything from scratch, it sounds like.
So yeah, other kind of situations would be like when your front-end team requires to have a completely free way of dealing with the technologies and frameworks that they want. So that's one situation, and another one would be, for instance, you build your content model, right? And then you want to reuse that because you're going through a redesign, as we talked earlier before. So if you have a decoupled strategy, and by a decoupled strategy would be just writing a contract between the backend team and the front-end team, and provide an interface between those. And that contract is everything that matters at that point. So at any time, you can just swap out any of the parts that you are that you're using, right? You could just remove completely the front end and put a new one that is a complete redesign, and you don't need to change any of the content that you have there. You don't need to do migrations, etc. So another situation would be when you have a large project and you start leveraging multiple teams, and those teams have multiple and different skill sets, or maybe when more than one content consumer, being a website or a mobile app, or maybe sending data to an aggregator or smart TV, or these days there are multiple ways of consuming content. When you have multiple of those, then having a decoupled website is a good choice. But on the other hand, benefits or situations where you could prefer a coupled website are when you have a very specific tool that is designed to use for your use case, for your specific use case. And then it's providing, helpers to just point and click and generate the exact thing that you want to do. And I would think about these brochure site generators, which are very targeted in what they do, and they provide us an out-of-the-box solution. Then in those situations, maybe it's better to just use this coupled strategy, or not doing this decoupled separation.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, and I love that you brought up the content migration component, because hands down, in every university I've worked at, that is the most painful part of going through and copying and pasting text and make sure it's formatted correctly, and putting all of our old good stuff over. And I mean, the University of Michigan Health System, there were thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of pages that our staff worked amazingly well to pull stuff over, and being able to just kind of do some of those updates and have it, you know, repurpose that content without having to drag it over, that would have been a blessing. Great. So how do you know if you should be considering decoupling your website?
Oh, I think we just covered most of that in Mateo's answer, right?
Yeah, I think you're exactly right.
Yeah.
So going back into decoupling and SEO, so I know search engine optimization in every university I've worked at, you're looking at least 75% of your traffic is coming from search. That's the primary way that our students and in this upcoming generation is using the web. Is they go to search, they find their resources, they want to go to their information. So how does decoupling work with search engine optimization? Do they work well together in regards of speed, responsiveness, stuff like that?
They can do. It depends how you build your decoupled website. So one of the really popular ways of doing it is to have JavaScript on the front end, for example, and that's code that runs in your browser. So maybe a few years ago, Google, for example, wasn't able to run that code in your browser. So if you were pulling in data that way, it wouldn't be able to see it, and so that was not great for SEO. But things have changed a lot now, so it can run that stuff. There's also ways of building what we call isomorphic apps, and that is a very long and complicated word, but it basically means that you can run the same code that you were going to run in your browser on the server, so Google can still see everything, which is great. But as I say, you don't have to build it that way. You can still build decoupled websites using tools on the server, and so it generates a page without any JavaScript, and you still have all the content there, so Google's able to index it. I think it's just whether you're decoupling or building a coupled site, you still have the same concerns either way. It's just that you solve the problems in slightly different ways.
Very cool. So are there any currently large websites that are using decoupling or are examples of decoupling?
Yeah, there are a few that we've worked on in the past. SNL, so Saturday Night Live would be one. Jimmy Fallon, and we did some work with NBA in the past as well. And so those would be three pretty large websites that a decoupled approach was used in some manner.
Yeah, so for instance, Saturday Night Live is one of the examples where going decoupled was actually a no-brainer, because I don't know if you played with it, but the Saturday Night Live iOS app, and then there's the Android app, and then there's a website for that. So having multiple ways to consume the same content, and in that case, it's a video repository of the 40 years of Saturday Night Live, was a way to deliver that web experience. And for Jimmy Fallon, that was a different motivation, and it was mainly because the team that built the front end had a very specific skill set that the project wanted to use. So we decoupled the back end, and then they could, as we say, do their magic.
That's awesome. And one of the things that I love is each of the examples that you gave, all the websites seem to be very engaging and very appealing and interactive. And that's something that we definitely need to do in higher education. We need to find ways of appealing to students and having this interactive, personalized component that we're not really doing as well as we should for the most part. So we talked a little bit about this, but so what are the benefits that are gained with decoupling? Could we dive a little bit more into that?
Yeah, so there's definitely more freedom on the front end because none of your markup is dictated by the back end. In a coupled approach, the front end is tightly integrated with the back end. If you take Drupal, for example, the theme layer is very heavy. There's a lot of back-end work that you're doing with the front-end work and kind of slows things down. But in a decoupled approach, you're completely separated from that, where you're just getting data from the back-end and you have the freedom to do what you want with it on the front end using new technologies. And yeah, so there's a lot of benefits on that end. You can also use a different stack where it's appropriate. So, for example, you can use Node.js more easily, whereas if it was Drupal only, it would be pretty hard to utilize that without doing weird things. And you can swap one part of the system out without upgrading the entire thing, which I think is a huge win, especially in longevity of websites. You can also have multiple front ends, so if you wanted a mobile app, that would be much easier. And the same goes the other way. If you wanted to add additional back-end technologies, it's also easier to plug in. Say you had data from Moodle or something, and you wanted to push that through, it would be easier to do. You can also swap out the back end and keep the same front end. So if your back end needed to completely change, you could keep the front end there, and your site, wouldn't go down if you were using something like a flat database in the middle that kept some of the information there. So less maintenance downtimes and planning around that too.
So you're saying it's faster to update, there's less maintenance, we have more flexibility, like, that's awesome. So are there any financial or budget implications? Like, let's get down to dollars and cents, when the goal is a decoupled website.
We're developers, so like almost the wrong people to ask in a way, but I mean, from our experience, we would say it is probably slightly more expensive the first time around, just because if you're not used to building something that way, then you've got stuff to learn, and that takes time, and you need to make mistakes and do all that fun stuff that comes with it. But I think after that, every iteration you do becomes cheaper. So instead of having to rebuild the front end and the back end, then you've only got to rebuild this like one small part of your system.
Yeah, because this is sort of a newer approach, depending on the technology that you choose, there's definitely a learning curve involved, and you have to think of your teams selectively, for sure. So that might raise the price in the beginning, but every iteration after that would be better.
Yeah, and I would add to that it's just slightly trickier to develop, and I find that one of the things that makes this happen is because you have to write this contract that I was talking about before, this thing that lies between the front end and the back end, and keeping everyone happy is in there. It can be time consuming, and leveraging all the technologies. Every team wants to do it their way, and that sometimes can add up at the end of the project.
Very cool. So one of the things that we looked at here at the University of Virginia is all the different platforms that we have to, all the different CMSs we could potentially use. So I know that all of you are very big enthusiasts for Drupal, and I'm on the bandwagon. There's a lot of great things there, but hypothetically, could we create decoupled websites in WordPress or Joomla or other content management systems, or is this something we only can do in Drupal?
You can do it in anything. I don't directly have experience of doing it in WordPress or Joomla myself, so I couldn't answer any specifics on that. But one of the more famous examples is NPR. They have their own custom CMS. They were one of the first people to start being very vocal about this approach, I think. They have this thing called Cope, which is create once, publish everywhere. Yeah, and they did that with their own custom stuff. So you can do it with anything.
That's brilliant.
AWS is Amazon Web Services is also, it's not managing content obviously, but it's a great success story for decoupling. When they built all their different services, they decided that they would only use what we call APIs to contact each other. So there was no like hidden ways that one part of the system could communicate with another part of the system that you as an end user couldn't do. And they've been like pretty successful, I'd say.
Need a little bit of money. So.
Yeah.
Great. So what are some of the technologies that you're using for decoupling websites?
So we mentioned before Saturday Night Live. In Saturday Night Live, we have a double backend. It's not a simple one. It's Drupal plus a semantic database called MarkLogic, and that is how we model our content and how we store it, and we use it to do semantic searches and context-based suggestions for the users. And also we add a Node.js layer that is in charge of serving all this content to all the front ends. And the front ends are Android and iOS, and then it's a web app that's built with a framework called React.js, which is, I believe, one of the coolest things that are available now. But I'm a backend guy.
Very cool. So if any of our users have any questions, you're welcome to tweet them to us using the hashtag HigherEdLive. So kind of wrapping up here at the end, what is the most important thing that universities and colleges should consider when creating websites that should really last the test of time?
I think when creating a sustainable website that serves its purpose both now and in the future, the most important and likely difficult thing is to try and architect a system that can flexibly handle unforeseen changes, be they content or design needs, without having to dismantle previous work. Which is why we feel that the decoupled approach is good for longevity and sustainable sites.
I think that's great. Well, I really appreciated the time with all three of you. Thank you so much for joining us. Do you have any other wise words to leave higher ed folks with?
Have a good day.
Drink tea every morning.
Yes.
That's a good British, good words of advice.
And bears every evening.
Did you say run away from bears?
No, well.
Yeah, he's from Canada, so run away from bears. They're not your friends.
It was actually beers because, also Canada.
Bears and beers, they're both, good Canadian things. Anything from Spain? Run away from bulls?
No, that covers it.
He's like, stop. All right, wonderful. Well, I want to thank you all for joining us today. I had a great, great time learning a lot more about decoupling and some of the benefits. And as always, you can check out more shows from Higher Ed Pros on higheredlive.com. See you next time.
See you guys.
Bye.
Bye-bye.